Hi everyone, it's Shaun Murphy and welcome back to my channel. And today it's a biggie, it's the cue action. So the cue action, what is it? Why is it important? Loads of people have got into the comments in recent videos asking for this video, and here it is. You know, you can take this as deep as you want to. I like to try and keep things simple. I think the cue action, along with the stance, the grip, and the bridge, make up those 4 foundational elements to your game. And as I say, there are advanced levels of all of those topics, but the 4 of them together, they make up the cornerstones of a really solid technique. And of course, the more solid your technique is, the more reliable it is under pressure, whether that's pressure in your local under 14s event at your local club, whether that's the local handicap tournament in your league, whether that's a Monday night snooker league, or if you're playing for the country, or if you're trying to become a professional. It doesn't make any difference. Pressure is pressure. And the stronger your technique can be, the more reliable you're going to be under that pressure. The cue action, how that cue actually ends up going from here, back, and through the cue ball is what the game's all about, isn't it? You know, when we get to it, that's what snooker's all about. How do I apply that spin? How do I strike the ball properly? How do I make it do what I want it to do when I want it to do it? That all comes down to how you maneuver this cue, and if you can keep it in as straight as line as possible on the way back and on as straight a line as possible on the way through. These are things that will improve your consistency, and of course that in turn will make you a better player. So cue action, you know, there's so much gets said about it in terms of, is it about how many feathers you have? You know, I've heard stories of players counting feathers. I've heard of players, they don't have any feathers at all. They don't really waggle their cue. I mean, in golf it's called a waggle. In snooker we call this feathering, this art of moving the cue back and forth before you play the shot. Do you know, I actually really don't know why any of us do it. You know, I don't understand why any of us are doing that bit before we hit the ball. It's almost like you're thinking of maybe, I don't know, getting a sense of what you're going to do, how hard you're going to hit it. It's almost like a practice swing, isn't it? Without actually going through with the shot and hitting it. I don't know, I've always thought that there's a lot of logic in players who get down at the shot and they stay there. You know, think of somebody like a Marco Fu. You know, he just gets down there, doesn't have any feathers, and then he hits the ball and everything stays still. I've always thought there's a lot of logic in that. It's not what I do, and I don't know many players that do it, but I actually think there's quite a lot in it. You know, if we talk about consistency and we talk about finding a technique that's repeatable, we talk about staying still, we talk about, you know, you want to hit that cue ball exactly where you mean to, as often as you possibly can. Surely having the fewest moving parts has to be helpful towards that. So if you can just get down to the red in the correct place to start with, if you're there and you know that's right, well, just stay there and then take the cue back and hit the cue ball. Now, that feels totally alien to me. I don't like that at all. But I think if I was starting playing snooker tomorrow, I'd probably have a look at that. And, you know, there's a few players who've done it. Marco is the one who springs to mind as having been the most successful. And Marco's had an excellent career doing it that way. So I think that just goes to show that, you know, you don't have to do it one way. You don't always have to have the same amount of feathers. You don't have to feather at all. What matters with the cue action, when we talk about players having a good cue action, what we actually mean is one of 2 things. One, they're either super consistent at hitting that cue ball in their desired position more often than not, or they get a lot of spin out of the cue ball with minimum effort. And there's a couple of tips that I've got which I think can help both of those parts of the game. Let's just deal with feathering first, because that's the elephant in the room, isn't it? That's the one that everyone likes to talk about. Let's take somebody like a Mark Selby, for instance. Mark Selby likes to get down to the shot. He'll get down to the shot first. He brings his tip into position and holds it. Then he'll have 1, then he'll have 2, freeze, back, and strike. Mark does that on every shot he plays, every tournament around the world, every week, month, day of the year. Doesn't matter how easy the shot is, that's how he plays it. Imagine Mark Selby, you've seen him before so many times. Gets down, freezes, he checks that everything's in the right place, then he'll have 1, 2, stop, back, pause, strike. The thing about that is that it's repeatable. He knows that it works, and he repeats it on every single shot. Doesn't matter if the red's over the pocket, and it doesn't matter if he's playing a snooker escape, sending the cue ball off 5 cushions to nestle on a red somewhere around the table. He has the same cue action every single time. So it's repeatable. He knows it works, and he does it every time. There's a lot to be said for that. If I take my own cue action in isolation for a moment, I've never been able to get down to the ball there and freeze and then carry on. I'm one of the few players that I know who my feathering process, taking that cue back, actually starts as I'm getting down. As I get here, I've already started the process of taking the cue back. Now, I don't remember being taught this, but it's something that I do, and I've tried to stop it. I mean, who knows why, but I have tried. I think for more aesthetics than anything. I think it's more aesthetically pleasing to do that, get in position, and then start the shot build-up, the cue action. But I've always done this. As I'm getting down to the shot, somewhere in this position, somewhere there, somewhere between here and being at the cue ball, my backswing has already started. And I tend to get here and I'm on the move. 1, 2, 3, back. Now, I'm counting those feathers for you there simply just as something to illustrate, how many I might do. I'm not focusing on that when I'm in play. Some players do 3, some players do 7. Peter Ebdon used to do 15. Depends on the shot. If you think of somebody like Ronnie O'Sullivan, he can get down to the shot and he's played it before the referees had a chance to spot the ball. Or sometimes you'll see him there and he's eyeing the shot up, he's getting that sense of feel and he strikes the ball as and when he's ready. There is no right and wrong way to do this. This really is all about you and what you think suits your game. But the trick is to find whatever works for you and then, a la someone like Mark Selby, repeat it. Get that good technique, link it with a good grip, good bridge, a good stance, and if you can knit all of that together with a reliable, consistent cue action, you're going to be a very, very good player. The second part of the cue action is all about striking the cue ball how and where you want to for the spin that you're trying to put on the cue ball. And there's always been a debate whether a player should change their cue action based on what they're trying to achieve. I was actually taught from being a young boy that you have a cue action, that's it, don't change it. But as I've got older and more experienced with the game, I start to question whether that's true, because how can one action, how can one length of backswing or one speed of backswing achieve every single shot? I don't think that's possible. Can a golfer play all of the shots they need to play with one type of swing? I'm not sure they can. So for me, that old-fashioned style of find a cue action, keep it, do the same thing every single time, have the same backswing length, have the same backswing speed, those old myths for me, they don't quite cut it anymore. I don't think they actually stand up to questioning. And so, as I say, when I was taught to always have the same cue action, I think whatever my teacher failed to tell me was that there should have been an asterisk next to that which says something like, can be changed if necessary or if the shot requires it. I've always had a very long, languid cue action where on the final backswing the cue tends to come back, almost to the edge of my bridge, you know, to where the V of my forefinger and my thumb meet. And that's been, you know, a hallmark of my game, because what that gives me is the ability to, if I have to play this shot here, you know, pot the red, screw back on and off for the blue, it's not a difficult shot. But for me, it's particularly straightforward because I generate so much spin that it's just not a shot that I struggle with. Those deep screw shots where you're potting a long red and zipping the cue ball back to the balk end, they're not a difficult shot for me. However, the problem is that when you take the cue back, a little bit too far for the shot that's required, it's possible that you might take the cue offline. And now we're into the real problem, because all of this is great if you can take the cue back in a straight line and then deliver it back to where you start. If we could do that, we'd all be absolutely perfect, wouldn't we? We'd all be winners every week. I'm just going to show you a very small version of what I'm talking about. Absolutely elementary shot, straight shot into the pocket. But you can see on a straight line there, I take the cue back straight to there and through straight, everything goes in the middle. Took the cue back and I brought it through in a straight line and I hit the cue ball exactly where I meant to. But what happens if I don't do that? What happens if by accident I take the cue back slightly offline, I take it slightly away from my body by mistake? Then how do I get the cue tip back to where it started at the cue ball? Now we're into dangerous territory. Now we're into the position where you could miss anything. Taking the cue back in a straight line and returning it back to where it starts is absolutely essential. Well, taking it back in as straight a line as you possibly can. There are very few players who are able to take that cue back in a straight line perfectly every single time. It's very, very hard to do. I myself have a little technical problem where every now and again I'll be at this shot, and when I take the cue back, I sometimes take it out over there. Now that's obviously an exaggeration, but that's my own little technique tendency. The problem from there is, how do I get the cue, once the cue has gone back offline, how do I now get the tip back to where I want? There has to be a readjustment, and if I make that readjustment too much, I could miss. So there have been some shots in my career where that cue action flaw of taking the cue offline and then back to the wrong point on the tip has actually cost me many matches, in fact some big tournament losses over the years. That one technical issue, and it's something I've tried desperately to fix. To fix it, I've tried shortening my bridge. You know, if I keep the bridge closer to the ball, the backswing cannot be as long, therefore it will stay straighter for longer. A couple of seasons ago I went through a period of keep the bridge in the normal place but shorten the backswing. You know, if I don't take the cue back as far, it can't go offline, and that's true. But for somebody like me who's played the game a certain way with a long flowing cue action since I was 9 years of age, suddenly shortening it to that has been very, very difficult for me to adjust to, and I've actually moved away from that. But you know, we're all trying to improve our technique. We're all looking for that, you know, improvement in our cue action. The best tip I could possibly give you to have a good cue action and to get the maximum out of the cue ball with minimum effort would be to do this. This is something that I did throughout my early pro career, junior career, and whenever I'm struggling for a bit of timing, I always go back to it. And what I'm talking about is that final backswing. What I try and do in my mind is imagine the tip moving away from the cue ball as slowly as I can possibly make it, to the point where, to me, it feels as if it's hardly moving. Because if I can get that backswing slow and steady away, I feel like I'm always going to time the ball as well as I possibly can. Timing, what does that mean? Timing, we're talking about the tip of the cue traveling at its optimum speed at the moment it strikes the cue ball. That's how we time the ball well. There's no point it doing its fastest movement from the top of the swing, because then you're kind of jerking it into the cue ball, you're stabbing at it, you're just punching it. What we want is that nice follow through so you can get as much spin on the cue ball as you possibly can. But also, the slower you move, I think the easier it is to return it back to where it starts. And of course, that's the real key, isn't it? That's the essential part of it. When we talk about someone having a good cue action, we mean that they're able to take the cue back and return it to where they want to consistently. That's all we really mean about it. So for me, if you're struggling with your cue action, you can try any of those things I've mentioned. You can try moving your bridge a bit closer. You can try shortening the swing if you've got problems with the cue going offline. If there's a bit of lateral movement in your swing, you can try taking it offline. But I think one of the big tips that I learned as a boy, and it still serves me well to this day, is to take that cue back as slow as you possibly can. And I'll try and show you what I mean here now. You know, on some of these shots, you might rush to take the cue back and you don't really get the spin that you want. But if you watch the difference now when I play this shot, I'm going to play this shot with a similar speed, but just with a slower backswing. And this cue ball will come fizzing back to me now. Really nice and slow. And back it comes. I think I hit those balls quite similarly, to be honest. That second one had so much more spin. You won't be able to move that cue slowly enough for it to be silly, for it to look silly. I promise you, if you want to be a better timer of the ball or to be a better striker of the ball, make sure you take that cue back as slowly as you can. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, make sure to hit that subscribe button and that like button. Get those notifications turned on so you don't miss any future content. And I shall see you next time.